We have a long few years ahead of us. I believe that we will be able to get through all this by working together in partnership with our stakeholders at all levels of government. We're so privileged to have a fine institution like UMass Chan in our community with brilliant minds that are internationally recognized for their work and 2 Nobel Peace Prize winners. The research that is being housed in this campus holds the solutions for some of the humanity's greatest ailments. Unfortunately, cuts from the National Institutes of Health may set us back in our quest to find solutions to problems. I can take comfort in knowing that our state does not stunt growth, and we hope that we can find support to keep the valuable work going here. Massachusetts is known for being home to some of the finest institutions in the country, and I'm proud that our state is led by an administration that supports the work being done by people in this building and throughout the Commonwealth. It is now my pleasure to call on the champion for the Team Massachusetts, a supporter of Worcester, and the governor of our great state, Maura Healey.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor Petty, and good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank Chancellor Collins and all at UMass Chan Medical School for hosting Commissioner Robbie Goldstein and myself today. Thank you for showing us this stunning new facility, the Paul J. DeMare Center for Education and Research. I'm honored to be joined by our terrific Commissioner for the Department of Public Health, Dr. Robbie Goldstein, as well as members of the legislature, including representatives from Senator Moore's office. I was here last May to speak at commencement, and I felt incredible enthusiasm across this whole community, and that was well-deserved. We were celebrating doctors, nurses, and scientists who were graduating, setting out to heal the sick and cure disease in our state, country, and beyond. This year, we've been celebrating our Nobel Prize winner, Victor Ambros, who is a UMass Chan scientist. I was just upstairs touring his lab. And he's not the school's first Nobel laureate major prize winner either. We also have from here Craig Mello, who won the Nobel Prize back in 2006 and continues on in science here at UMass Chan. UMass Chan is foundational to our state's success. It's an example of the incredible assets that we have in our state. It trains world-class doctors and nurses with nationally recognized leadership in the primary care space that's so critical to our health system. It supports access to care at more than 100 clinical affiliates statewide, from Cape Cod to the Berkshires. It also hosts an amazing VA program at this outpatients facility right here on campus that is serving nearly 20,000 veterans. And UMass Chan scientists are advancing knowledge and finding cures for diseases that help make Massachusetts the global capital for life sciences. And overall, it has a tremendous impact, positive impact on the economy in Greater Worcester, employing 6,000 people in good jobs and creating over $2 billion of total annual economic impact. And it's helped Worcester become the 15th largest life science cluster in the entire country, ahead of much larger cities. So, look, I'm here today to honor and celebrate UMass Chan. As I said, it's an incredibly important asset and institution, not just for our state, for our country. The way in which people are trained here, whether they're going into a hospital or a clinical setting, or the scientists and the researchers who are pioneering new cures and treatments for all sorts of diseases and issues, is truly amazing. The reason I am here today, though, is because institutions like UMass Chan are under threat. They're under threat from the Trump administration, which announced weeks ago cuts to funding for NIH, the National Institutes of Health. We need to make clear what's at stake here, because UMass Chan is such a great institution. It, in fact, wins more NIH funding than the total amounts going to 26 other states. Last year, it received $193 million. But this year already, over $30 million in expected grant funding has been withheld or withdrawn. Another $50 million is at risk. The funding cuts are very extensive, including supporting critical work in gene therapy, rare disease research, HIV research, digital medicine, neuroscience, and more. UMass Chan has held groundbreaking clinical trials of new genetic therapies for devastating conditions like ALS and so many other diseases. But this kind of progress is now at risk, and with that, hope is being stripped away from patients and families. I just had an opportunity to sit with members of the faculty here, and here's what's happening. Here's what was some of what was shared with me. Already, UMass Chan, and I think this is a comment that I am making that is not specific only to UMass Chan. It is something that other research institutions, teaching hospitals, medical schools are experiencing right now across Massachusetts and across the country. And it's really, really bad. These are cuts to science, cuts to research, and cuts that will be irretrievable if something isn't done to reverse them. As a result of the cuts that have happened already by the Trump administration, UMass Chan has had to cut its class sizes, has had to actually rescind offers that were previously made to people who want to come and study here and do research and train as scientists, maybe the next cadre of Nobel-winning scientists out of this institution. They've had to pause faculty recruitment because this is a very uncertain time and they're not sure what can continue to be funded. Graduate students, postdocs, and junior faculty are looking at their careers and wondering what their future looks like and if it can continue to be in science, in research, in medicine. America is the world's leader in innovation, and Massachusetts has been the country's leader in innovation. And we have the receipts to show for it. Receipts that speak to a economy of an ecosystem that is born from research and science and nurtured through the work of our clinical programs and our teaching hospitals. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of jobs and millions, billions in economic impact. And maybe more important in what is sometimes hard to quantify in terms of a price is the way in which research and science coming out of institutions like Chan here in Massachusetts are changing and have changed people's lives, literally saved lives by curing diseases, by providing innovative treatments, changing the world and outcomes. But all of that is under risk. And it's the result of a terribly misguided and self-inflicted wound by the Trump administration. Because of these cuts, we now have other companies coming to Massachusetts and coming to other states looking to recruit our scientists and researchers. The Trump administration is essentially giving away intellectual assets to other countries right now who will find ways to bring these people on board, hire them, and then that research is going to be done over there, and those discoveries are going to be made over there. I think about all the life sciences. You know, Greater Boston and Massachusetts, we are home to 18 of the top 20 major life sciences pharmaceutical companies in the entire world. They come here for a reason, just like 100,000 foreign students come here for a reason. This is the place to learn, to do research, to innovate, to make new discoveries, to start companies, and to grow in life sciences. But too often, whether it's China or other companies right now, they're the ones swooping in for Massachusetts American talent. It's also true that the budget proposal that the House Republicans recently passed and that President Trump called for would strip hundreds of billions of dollars from another source, Medicaid, in order to fund tax cuts for the wealthiest. So we have cuts to NIH happening alongside proposed cuts to Medicaid. That will jeopardize health care for over 2 million patients in Massachusetts alone, the proposed cuts to Medicaid. And that includes, of the 2 million people we're talking about hundreds of thousands of children, many of whom get their care at UMass Chan affiliates. In addition, we've already seen massive layoffs at the VA, which has put veterans' health care at risk. These cuts don't reflect Massachusetts values. They don't reflect American values. They're not who we are. Americans want to support innovation. We've been about that for a good long 250 years and counting. They want to support research. They want to support science. Americans want veterans to be helped. They want our children to get health care. They want the economy to grow and create jobs. And they want cures for diseases that hurt loved ones. That's what UMass Chan does every single day. That's what Massachusetts does. That's who we are and what we're about. And that's what we stand for. So today, we stand with the scientists, we stand with the researchers, we stand with the community at UMass Chan and the greater community across the state when we speak up against these cuts. And we'll continue to speak up about this. And I now want to bring forth a person who's been an incredible leader for UMass Chan, and that is its wonderful Chancellor, Michael Collins.
Thank you, Governor, very, very much for being here today. Thank you, Mayor. Commissioner Goldstein, always nice to have you on campus. Craig, thank you for your continued leadership here. I'll be brief because I know you probably have some questions for the Governor. Just make a few comments. Research brings hope to the human condition. And it is shocking to an academic community like ours that research would be attacked, particularly by folks who believe that America should be the best. We've worked hard over, I'm here now nearly 2 decades. We've worked hard over those 2 decades to build one of the finest academic research institutions in the world. When we recruit a faculty member, we see the top 5 people in the world, and we're able to recruit the person that we want to be here. And now, that research infrastructure, the very essence of research funding, is being threatened. A colleague of mine said a few weeks ago that NIH funding was like the sun. It comes up every day. Research funding comes every year. And now, having built beautiful facilities, have it attracted some of the finest scientists in the world, we have these very precipitous cuts. There's been all sorts of conversation about indirect costs and paying for facility fees. That is one element. I'm sure there's something that all of America's research enterprises could work out on that with relatively short amount of time with some great thinking. But what's happened in addition to that is that grants have been stopped from being funded. That study sections and councils, which is the process used by the NIH to award grants, has more or less ground to a halt. And that's costing serious resources for institutions that are trying to maintain incredible science at a very important time in its history. One other point. We attract some of the incredibly talented youngest minds in science to come to our institution, to be either a learner, a postdoc, or a junior faculty member. And these folks are particularly threatened at the moment. When you come to an institution, the institution provides research funding for the first few years, and then research support is garnered from either foundations or the NIH. These faculty, these future thought leaders, Craig's Nobel was almost, the science was almost 30 years ago. 31 years ago was when the science was. The prize was awarded 12 years later. The future Nobel laureates could be at risk if this funding does not come. And I'm proud to stand with our governor, with our Commissioner of Public Health, with our Attorney General, folks who understand this issue and have been at the forefront of arguing for it. I think it's time to put partisan politics aside, to understand the importance of America's research enterprise, to get the funding back flowing, and then let all of us come together to work through whatever issues we need to work through so we can assure that America's Biomedical Research Institute remains the finest in the world.
Thank you, Chancellor.
Thank you, Governor.
I'm calling an audible. Craig Mello, why don't you come up, Craig, and just offer your thoughts on all of this as somebody who's benefited from NIH funding. You understand. And as a scientist and a researcher, and not for nothing, a Nobel laureate out of Massachusetts, can help explain to folks why what the Trump administration is doing is so devastating.
Thanks, Governor. Yeah, my heart breaks every day for the patients and the families who could benefit from the work that's going on here and elsewhere inside of academia. We have at our fingertips now really transformational medicines that are based on genetics. We've done a really bad job of explaining what that means, but if you're the patient getting one of these therapies, believe me, you come to understand it. My own daughter developed type 1 diabetes at the age of just 1.5, and I knew nothing about that disease except I knew about the gene and I knew about the signaling pathway, but I didn't know what it was like to be a patient with type 1 diabetes, which used to be a death sentence. Every single child who developed juvenile diabetes until about the end of the 1920s died inevitably, a horrible wasting death. It was worse than cancer. The prospects were horribly grim for these kids. And now there's a drug that came from, scientists just following their curiosity, working to try to discover what was missing from these kids that were dying. And that's what we've been doing now for decades. And it's just heartbreaking now with the genetic understanding of disease. We now know what's missing in so many different patients. We now have the ability with gene therapy and with this siRNA technology, pardon the jargon, we can actually fix it in many, many cases. And that research is funded by mostly the NIH, other funders as well. We're so grateful for philanthropic funding. We could certainly use a lot more of that. The state has backed us, throughout this whole process. And the beneficiaries of this are the patients. And right now, they are the ones who are going to be suffering the most. And it may be someone you love. It may even be you who could benefit from these therapies because they are going to impact everyone in the coming years. As you know, we understand the entire genetic code of the human now. Just think about that. We need to get to work to make the drugs that can help our fellow humans. Sorry, that's the indication I've gone too long. I think I should stop there, but yeah, thank you, and thank you, Governor,
Thanks,
for
Craig.
coming.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much, everyone.
Your attention, please.
Give it a minute.
The signal tone you have just heard indicates the report of an emergency in this building. Floors 7, 8, and 9. Walk to the nearest exit or exit stairwell and exit the building.
Unfortunately, it's going to repeat.
All other occupants
Okay.
may remain on your floor until further instructions are
We'll just wait a minute? Okay.
Attention, your attention, please. The signal tone you have just heard indicates the report of an emergency in this building. Floors 7, 8, and 9. Walk to the nearest exit or exit stairwell and exit the building. All other occupants may remain on your floor until further instructions are announced. Attention, your attention, please. The signal tone you have just heard indicates the report of an emergency in this building. Floors 7, 8, and 9. Walk to the nearest
great.
exit or exit stairwell and exit the building. All other occupants may remain on your floor until further instructions are announced.
Great. Happy to take any questions. Let's start with on topic.
Governor, I don't know if you or the Chancellor or Craig would want to answer. Can you give us a day-to-day picture of what it looks like right now, based on what's happened so far since the Trump administration's taken office? And my apologies for my tardiness.
Okay. Do you want to start?
Sure. So what's happening is sort of severalfold. First, scientists write grants, and then a group of talented individuals come together to review those grants. and each grant is given a score. And it's like golf, low score wins. So when you get the score for your grant, you have a sense of what the pay line is. In other words, if you have an 8 and you know they're going to pay at 12, you're pretty confident that your grant's going to be funded. So we have roughly in the $25 to $40 million area grants that we know have fundable scores, but the grants are actually not being awarded. That the process by which once the study section has done its work, then there's notices put into the Federal Register, and the grants are then moved forward. And one of the things we've encouraged folks to do is whatever kind of administrative efficiencies or whatever you're trying to put in place, award the grants that have already been approved and get that money out the door. It's been appropriated by the Congress. It's available to be funding. If we have to change the system going forward, that's one thing. But the precipitous change. Then the second thing that occurred is over the course of a weekend, February 7th to February 10th, the rate at which institutions would be reimbursed for the cost of running. So these research facilities are not inexpensive. And there's heat, light, power, the people to maintain them, the mortgage, all those kinds of things. And there's a very well-honed process that's been used where the federal government audits the costs, and then the costs are agreed to in a contract. And over the course of a weekend, that number was reported to be reduced to 15%. And of course, the very talented folks in our Attorney General's office joined with other states, went to the courts. There's been the first was a temporary injunction, now a permanent injunction, and we're waiting to find out exactly what will be the result of that effort. So for us, the ability for us to plan for the future, for our scientists, I spoke to a young scientist this morning who has had 4 grants, has 1 now, has 2 more, 1 that's already got a fundable score, and 2 more that should be reviewed this week and 2 weeks from now, and he's really not sure exactly what's going to happen. That's the uncertainty that's come into the research infrastructure here.
If he doesn't hear, what happens?
Well, there are 2 things. He has to let some people go, and we try to find institutional resources to be able to buffet him during this temporary period of time. One of the things that I think is extremely important is that we hear from the NIH. There's a new director there now. It's time to hear from the NIH director. What is the plan? How are things going to be administered? When are the funds going to start to flow again? What is the process that's going to be used? Because every American research infrastructure institution needs some certainty about the process going forward. Thank you all.
Yeah. I mean, in broad strokes, what's happening on campuses around Massachusetts as a result of NIH cuts already, we have seen people had to be laid off. We have seen class sizes cut. We have seen people who have been accepted into graduate programs, undergraduate programs, postdoc programs. They've had their offers taken away. We have seen grants not funded. We have seen other grants that we thought were forthcoming not come through because, as the chancellor says, while the attorney general has done an outstanding job going to court, getting orders from federal courts saying, let these dollars flow, these NIH dollars flow as they're supposed to, as they've been promised, the Trump administration is ignoring court orders right now or is slow walking in terms of delivering funds. So it's a really acute situation. It's having a devastating impact on our healthcare institutions here in Massachusetts, research institutions, teaching hospitals. It's not unique to Massachusetts, but Massachusetts is home. We're the global hub of life sciences, so it's having a disproportionate effect on places like Massachusetts. But you know, more than anything, you think about with 1 month of research, you lose 1 month of research in a lab, you may be losing 10 years worth of research. So the NIH needs to make this right, needs to restore these funds. The Trump administration needs to stop playing games with science, needs to stop playing games with funding that support things that are not political, that are not partisan, that have been about American innovation for the last part of or the better part of the last 150 years, and certainly the last part of the 80 years since World War II, where the federal government made a concerted decision to invest in research, to invest in science, and as a result, we have seen the world's greatest explosion of science that history has ever seen. but that is at risk now, and it is being stopped in places, and that includes job loss, it includes the loss of cures and treatments, and if we don't see action now, this will be irretrievable. I've also said, as governor, I'm going to do everything I can to protect our institutions, to protect this funding, to protect and support our scientists and our research. We all need to come together and protect these intellectual assets here in Massachusetts that are world-changing and certainly so important to the quality of life and well-being of residents here, but all around the globe.
And how does the state do that? How does the state do that, aside from legal action and trying to get that money? What other ways would the state be able to protect it?
Well, we have to think about everything. I mean, we have through Mass Life Sciences Center funding, and we continue to fund there. My budget includes funding for that. But, you know, I am pointing out the acuity of the situation right now. We have not been in this situation, just like we've not been in a situation where a president of the United States has ignored court orders. But that's what we're seeing. We've not been in a situation where people are afraid to walk the streets for fear of being disappeared or removed, even though they've done nothing wrong. And that includes some of the researchers and scientists among us in this country. So, you know, we're in uncharted, unprecedented times right now, but I am calling on all of us to work together, both in government, outside of government, in academia, in the not-for-profit, and philanthropy, to work on this, and certainly to work on the advocacy so that the Trump administration and NIH and Congress take action to make this right and restore funding.
UMass Chan has said that it stands to lose $40 to $50 million annually if these cuts occur, the indirect cuts. You've talked just now about working together, but will the state step up and look at its budget and come up with the funds to help Chan and other institutions in Massachusetts to weather this storm?
Yeah. Unfortunately, as you've reported, there are all sorts of cuts that we're looking at because NIH cuts are just one of dozens and dozens of cuts that have been made. We've seen federal funding cut off for our schools, for our universities, for food for children, for heating assistance for seniors. We've seen other cuts in healthcare, in transportation. We've seen cuts in resilience. We've seen cuts in funding that's supposed to go to repair roads and bridges. So there's cuts across the board coming out of the Trump administration. And I've also been clear that there's no amount of money in the state's wherewithal in the budget and what we have to be able to account for or make up for what is being cut. And my fear is that with what the House Republicans proposed, if that becomes law, we're going to see further cuts and further devastation to people here. So it's important for people to know that so that they can take action and be advocates and get Congress to step in and save funding where it needs to be saved, including for the most vulnerable among us, as well as for the science and the innovators out there.
Governor, across the board with the administration funding situation seems to be a tool of leverage to change policy. For example, with Harvard and what they're going through right now, is there an element to that in this case? And then can you expand a little bit on how Harvard is pushing back on that?
Well, let me say I applaud Harvard University for not giving in to the bullying by President Trump and the administration, not giving in to the weaponization of Department of Justice assets and other assets across federal agencies. Look, this is, it's just become clear to me that there is an effort to target, there's an effort to weaponize, and it's not good. It's not good for our colleges and universities. It's not good for our research institutions. It's not good for our economy. Just look at what he's done around tariffs and the uncertainty that he's created, the chaos that he's created. It's just really bad overall. And, common sense needs to prevail, and the president needs to step up, in my view, and take action that is in furtherance of Americans' interests, including Americans' economic interests. And unfortunately, we haven't seen that happen. So it's very distressing to me. Also, the treatment of the Tufts University student who has essentially disappeared off the street Those are tactics akin to authoritarian regimes. By its own admission and memos, the Trump administration has admitted that there was no basis to withhold that individual, let alone to hold her, to take her from Massachusetts, and to not release her at this point. And unfortunately, she's not alone. We've continued to see other reports of other instances. So these are serious times. We're at a serious, serious crossroads in our country, and people need to understand what is happening across the board and work together to advocate for and to stand up in support of American freedoms, of American values, and of the things that have made our economy the most powerful in the world, have made us the leader in innovation, have made us a beacon of hope where others look to come to enjoy freedoms, and we need to get back to that.
How will the state deal with?
Yep, yep.
So we know that these NIH cuts are going to have effects far outside of the hospital walls. How do you potentially see these cuts affecting businesses, organizations, local economies outside of the healthcare?
It's a great question, and it's really important for people to understand this, because what these cuts do is they provide the fuel and the funding for our scientists and our researchers. In order to have scientists and researchers working somewhere, we need to employ construction workers to build out facilities and labs. We need to have people who are engaged in real estate work and architects and who drop the plans for these facilities and for these labs. We need the people to make the parts and the supplies and then drive the parts and supplies to these labs. Think about all the restaurants and hospitality associated with the work that goes on here. The copy shop around the corner, relying on the business of these scientists and researchers in these labs. There's so much to this ecosystem, and that is why I've said to every Massachusetts business out there, if you're not in life sciences, understand life sciences is in you, because it really is part of our entire economy. And it's why the ripple effects of something like NIH funding or cuts to research, cuts to healthcare are so devastating. Okay. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chancellor.